This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. Get a whole month free at Mubi.com/JaredBauer. Before entering production on The Batman, director Matt Reeves and his producer told Christopher Nolan that they aspired to beat him, to create no less than the best Batman series ever. Surpassing what is perhaps the definitive comic book adaptation is a tall order, no doubt. The Dark Knight trilogy set a new standard for the genre, proving that no line exists between superhero movies and thematically ambitious filmmaking. Bruce Wayne was now psychologically complex, and Gotham felt like a real modern city plagued with real modern problems. When a franchise is remade or rebooted, it's not just the effects and action scenes that get updated. The social backdrop, too, is often reimagined to reflect contemporary anxieties. The 1954 Godzilla was an allegory for nuclear destruction. Fast forward to the 2014 version, where he became a symbol for climate change. 1962's Manchurian Candidate explored fears of communist brainwashing, while in the 2004 version, corporate power and politics. 1956's Invasion of the Body Snatchers reflected Cold War anxieties about ideological conformity, while 1993's Body Snatchers took aim at the military-industrial complex during the Gulf War era. I could go on. Nolan's films tapped into the zeitgeist in a similar way. Batman Begins channels post-9/11 anxieties of terrorist groups spreading fear for a perceived greater good. The Dark Knight grapples with the moral gray areas required to fight ideological fanatics, such as mass surveillance. And as I touched on last year, The Dark Knight Rises dives into populist revolutionary sentiments in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. So if Reeves were really to eclipse Nolan, it wouldn't be enough to merely one-up the grittiness by drawing on different source material, sprinkling in some David Fincher, and making Wayne less Patrick Bateman and more Kurt Cobain plus Rorschach. No, in order to outdo Nolan's legacy, he'd have to come up with a timely take on a society in crisis. So did Matt Reeves succeed in carving out a unique social vision for his Caped Crusader? What can his efforts reveal about our ever-evolving understanding of justice? And how might this influence the much-hyped and frustratingly delayed sequel? Well, to find out, we're gonna have to dive deep into Pattinson's first outing and also pay a short visit to Oz and Sophia on HBO. Let's dive in. But before we get to it, I want to tell you guys about this video's sponsor, Mubi. Mubi is a curated streaming service bringing you hand-picked cinema from all over the world. Not only does Mubi have an incredible selection of films from iconic auteurs to emerging visionaries, but they've recently become a personal hero of mine after they took a huge risk and distributed one of my favorite films of last year, The Substance, and boy, did it pay off. Every single film is selected by Mubi's team of cinema lovers, and I'm constantly learning from their knowledge. As someone who loves digging deep into the ideas buried beneath the surface of films, Mubi is a treasure trove of exciting movies full of unique perspectives. I already mentioned The Substance, which is a must-watch, but you can also catch up with director Coralie Fargee's previous two films, Revenge and Reality Plus. Also in the US, they're streaming two of my favorite Richard Linklater films, Bernie, which is low-key one of Jack Black's best performances, and Boyhood, which is one of the most impressive cinematic feats of the last 20 years. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at Mubi.com/JaredBauer. That's MUBI.com/JaredBauer for a whole month of great cinema for free. These guys are straight up warriors of cinema, so give them a try. And now, back to the show. Alright, let's go into a quick recap. Gotham is thrown into chaos when, days before an election, the mayor is killed by the deranged Riddler. At the crime scene, Batman finds cryptic riddles and ciphers addressed specifically to him. The clue leads Batman to the mob-infested Iceberg Lounge, where he crosses paths with Selina Kyle, a cat burglar by night who's investigating the disappearance of her friend Annika. As Batman and Selina dig deeper, they discover that Gotham's elite, the mayor, the district attorney, the cops, are all in the pocket of mob boss Carmine Falcone, who's using the Gotham Renewal Project to pay off officials rather than help the needy. As the Riddler's trail of dead politicians grows longer, Batman is confronted with an unsettling revelation. His father once enlisted the help of Carmine Falcone in order to cover up a family scandal, leading to the unintended death of a journalist. Eventually, Batman discovers that Falcone ratted out a competitor in order to consolidate control of the underworld, and his co-conspirators in the government are now part of the ongoing corruption. Just as Batman is about to bring Falcone in, the Riddler assassinates him and surrenders. Inside Arkham, Arkham, the Riddler revels as his final plan comes to fruition. Bombs destroy the city's seawall, triggering a massive flood, while his followers launch an attack on the mayor-elect's victory party. Batman stops the Riddler's goons and devotes himself to aiding in the relief effort. In the end, despite romantic tensions, Batman and Catwoman part ways. The end. Alright, so in order to understand how the Batman positions itself in relation to its predecessors, we need to start with a brief overview of Nolan's social vision. In the Dark Knight trilogy, there's an emphasis on the redemptive power of symbols.
But it's a symbol that can be incorruptible.
When faced with issues like corruption in Batman Begins, the inherent innobility of man in The Dark Knight, and economic inequality in Rises, the answer seems to be that a powerful enough symbol can guide people to righteousness. In Batman Begins, the symbol of the bat strikes fear in the hearts of the corrupt. In The Dark Knight, Harvey Dent, Gotham's White Knight, a symbol Batman must uphold at any cost, gives people hope and inspires officials to stand up to the mob for the first time in years. And in The Dark Knight Rises, the symbol of the self-sacrificial Batman ennobles the police to topple Bane's revolution and reinstate order. As I mentioned in my Oppenheimer video, this emphasis on ideas and symbols is a recurring theme in Nolan's work. For a full breakdown, check out that video, but I'll just run through a few examples here. In Interstellar, the idea of love transcends space and time, ultimately leading Cooper back home. In Inception, a film about idea thieves, once someone contracts an idea, that kernel will grow and come to define that person. And in Oppenheimer, an idea or theory, whether social theory a la Marx or theoretical physics a la the bomb, can change the world forever. So with his Batman films, Nolan is staying within that tradition. Symbols can either scare people into virtue or empower them to believe in it. Reeves's Batman starts off similarly. At the beginning, Wayne stresses how embodying a symbol of vengeance spreads fear and functions as a deterrent.
Fear is a tool.
As a man, he's just an ass-kicking individual, but as a symbol, he can be everywhere.
They think I'm hiding in the shadows, but I am the shadows.
So, initially we're in familiar territory. People suck and need to be intimidated into change through a powerful idea. However, in this film, Bruce Wayne is unsure of his approach.
I wish I could say I'm making a difference, but I don't know.
And as he pursues the Riddler, he's confronted with scenarios that challenge the notion that symbols alone are sufficient to improve society. Perhaps it's also important to change people's material conditions, or put simply, make them less poor. The first challenge comes from Catwoman. When discussing Annika, her struggling immigrant friend stuck in a horrible situation, Selina insists that her lot in life is not a matter of poor choices. Such choices are a luxury for the rich.
It means your choices have consequences.
Jesus Christ. Choices? You know, whoever the hell you are, you obviously grew up rich.
For Selina, it matters less what ideas guide Annika's decisions. When living in poverty, you don't really have much of a choice. You just follow whatever opportunity enables you to survive. The second challenge is presented through a clever use of doubling. Throughout the film, Bruce is presented with distorted mirror images of himself, offering glimpses of how his life might have turned out if he were born into different circumstances. The most obvious one is the Riddler. They both fight corruption, they both rely on symbolic theatrics, and both process their trauma by journaling in a style reminiscent of Seven. But, most importantly, they're both orphans. However, during their climactic confrontation, the Riddler claims that a rich kid can hardly be considered an orphan.
Living in some tower over the park isn't being an orphan. Looking down on everyone with all that money.
Especially considering what he went through.
Do you know what being an orphan is? There's 30 kids to a room. You wake up screaming with rats, and every winter one of the babies die because it's so cold.
That someone living easy in a mansion could share the same label as someone freezing in a rat-infested hell shows how the idea of an orphan is insufficient to describe the vast difference in lived realities. So can ideals alone account for their different approaches to combating corruption, or were they shaped by their concrete economic and social realities? Can Batman's upstanding moral framework be attributed to a life of privilege, while the Riddler's deranged radicalism a result of poverty and neglect? This is a significant departure from The Dark Knight Rises, where the label orphan is a unifying concept.
Bruce Wayne, billionaire orphan? I mean, we used to make up stories about you.
The idea was to be a symbol. Batman could be anybody.
Here, the fact that Bruce was a billionaire and Blake was a poor kid off the street is irrelevant to the development of their moral path. Both are equally capable of rising above their circumstances to don the cape and cowl and promote justice. There are two other figures that reflect how privilege may have determined Bruce. The first is the mayor's son. Like Bruce, he comes from a powerful family, likes to dress up as a ninja, and becomes orphaned. During the mayor's funeral, Bruce is reminded of his own experience grieving his parents in the public eye. But despite his trauma, the boy's wealth will likely shield him from the desperation the Riddler experienced, unlike our second example, this guy, the reluctant armed robber from the opening scene. While not explicitly depicted as an orphan, he's a clear example of how one's economic scenario can trump their ideals. He's conflicted, so he's clearly got ideas of right and wrong, but ultimately he's driven to a life of crime out of economic necessity. He's very well what Bruce Wayne might have become if he didn't grow up rich. The point is, it's the material conditions that you grow up in that shape your path much more than the ideas you hold or the symbols that inspire you. What Reeves seems to be hinting at is a reversal of Nolan's approach. While Nolan presented an idealist approach to Batman, Reeves takes a more materialist approach. The difference between materialism and idealism can be thought of as a kind of chicken and egg scenario. For an idealist, ideas shape material reality. Society is primarily driven by beliefs, values, and consciousness, whereas a materialist argues that material reality shapes ideas, that our beliefs and ideologies are formed in reaction to the physical world. In social theory, a materialist analysis emphasizes that people's access to money, food, and resources has the biggest impact on shaping their experiences and possibilities. An idealist perspective, on the other hand, focuses on the power of beliefs, personal agency, and moral choices in shaping individual behavior and society. This more materialist lens is also evident in the Penguin.
You were born into opportunity, honey, so you can afford to think in black and white.
There are a few occasions when both Sophia and Oz stress that what's really going to make a difference for their communities is getting paid. Not ideals, not symbols, money.
We got the loyalty, we got the love. You know why? Because we pay them. You know how meaningful that is, Vic?
Sophia even goes full on wealth redistribution.
This was my father's, but he made it off of your labor. If you join me, and I will pay you what you're worth.
A materialist analysis naturally leads to a systemic critique, the notion that social change comes not from punishing corrupt individuals, but restructuring society, institutions, and incentives. And in the film, we see Gotham's problems identified as structural, that it's the whole system.
So much bigger than you could ever imagine. It's the whole system.
There's also Bella Real saying institutions must be improved at the end, but I think the question of who killed Thomas Wayne conveys this most impactfully. Toward the end, Bruce is forced to reconsider everything he thought he knew about his father's death. He initially believed it was a random mugger, but now he suspects it was orchestrated by Falcone, or maybe it was Maroni. Ultimately, Alfred says it doesn't matter. It could have been any of the many desperate people in the streets.
Maybe it was some random thug on the street who needed money, got scared and pulled the trigger too fast.
Pinning the blame on an individual would miss the larger point, that corruption in Gotham isn't about one crime boss or one act of violence. It's about an entire city shaped by inequality, desperation, and broken institutions. His father's death is cast as an inevitable symptom of a city that creates and sustains crime. In contrast to Nolan, the Batman shows a Bruce Wayne that's confronted with the notion that meaningful change requires restructuring the systems that create injustice in the first place, a take that's particularly relevant in an era marked by an ever-widening wealth gap, growing skepticism towards billionaires, rock-bottom trust in corporate news media, and influential social movements focused on institutional distrust. Or at least that's what it seems to be tapping into. Because in reality, the film doesn't really commit. Any hints towards changing the system are largely superficial. In the end, it's revealed that the Gotham Renewal Project, an initiative aimed at helping Gotham's most vulnerable citizens, has been hijacked by Falcone and the who's who of corrupt officials. The problem is, while Gill claims the system is the problem, what Bruce Wayne ultimately uncovers doesn't really align with a systemic critique in the true sense of the word. It's not the design of the institution institutions that's the problem. It's not that the laws, incentives, and distribution of power will inevitably produce crime, obscene inequality, and social rot. It's that specific powerful individuals have hijacked institutions for their benefit, suggesting that if you remove the bad actors, the system could function properly. Plus, Bruce Wayne doesn't really internalize anything the Riddler or Catwoman tried to impart on him. In fact, his final act epiphany is much more in line with Nolan, more about tweaking his symbol. During the interrogation, the Riddler reveals that he thought they were on the same team, that since Batman is a symbol of vengeance against the corrupt, he would be down with the murder spree. Then, during the flood scene, Batman is disturbed when he sees the Riddler's followers have aped his brand.
Who the hell are you?
I'm vengeance.
In response, Batman realizes that he needs to be more of a symbol of hope, leading people into the light instead of making them scared of the dark. It's not that symbols or ideas are inadequate to lift up an ailing system. It's that we just need ones that are less stick and more carrot.
I have had an effect here, but not the one I intended. Vengeance won't change the past. I have to become more. People need hope.
Bella Real, the progressive-coded beacon of hope, is just a new Harvey Dent, a symbol of uncompromising virtue and bravery, whose only promise of change is to vaguely inspire individuals to be less corrupt.
We must rebuild people's faith in our institutions, in our elected officials, in each other.
So while the Batman appears to set the stage for a counter-argument to Nolan's approach, it ultimately ends up reinforcing the same idea, the importance of symbols to guide individual behavior. But, you know, this is to be expected.
What are your superpowers again?
I'm rich.
Batman can only really be Batman by virtue of him having more money than everyone else, so the idea of him coming upon the realization that he needs to topple the system that maintains his privilege would be ridiculous.
Guy was just another rich scumsucker. Got what he deserved.
Plus, antagonists work a lot better when they're actual evil people who make evil choices, rather than abstract power structures. Just ask The Matrix Reloaded. A Batman that dabbles in radical social theory is a silly proposition. Of course, the movie would have to course correct, but it's worth asking. Why even bother flirting with politics that the film can't possibly deliver on? Superficially gesturing towards trendy radical politics is a hallmark of thoughtful Hollywood films, and in grappling with these movies, I find myself torn between two perspectives. The first comes from philosopher Frederick Jameson, who, while very critical of performative rejections of the status quo in movies, nevertheless believed that the fact artists feel compelled to include them does indicate a yearning for a better world, a yearning that one day perhaps can be harnessed for meaningful social change. On the other hand, there's the controversial Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin. I had an 11-hour plane flight last year, so I did the most edgelord thing and read his book Fourth Political Theory, which, while not very good, made one point that really stuck with me. For Dugin, we live in an era of post-politics. Liberal capitalism has defeated its enemies and penetrated culture so thoroughly that discussions of radical change have been reduced to a simulation, nostalgic entertainment, a spectacle of critique that is done primarily for fashion reasons. And I can't help but think that this is a reason for the Batman's more materialist take. To compete with Nolan, it had to differentiate itself to feel urgent in a time when people use words like institutional and systemic with abandon, but often because they've become aesthetic signals, shortcuts to the appearance of depth, rather than calls to action. And, you know, the Batman is a movie, not a manifesto, so aligning yourself with the cultural fashion of disillusionment is, understandably, smart business. But honestly, I kind of feel the same way about the world of politics influencers. How do we separate genuine efforts to challenge the status quo from the fact that outrage, critique, and cultural despair make for compelling entertainment? At what point does imagining a better world stop being a roadmap for action and start functioning as just a form of stimulation for those who prefer their entertainment laced with a hint of intellectualism and hope? Don't get me wrong, I like the Batman and the Penguin. I actually can't believe they work as well as they do. And let's not forget, we're still early on in this universe, so there are a lot of different directions it can go, but we definitely won't see this.
Why don't you come with me? Knock off some CEO hedge fund types, it'll be fun.
My favorite thing about this Batman is that more than previous incarnations, he's confused. Confused about his family legacy, confused about how society can be saved, confused as to if he's fixing the problem or just another symptom of it. Because that's exactly how I feel. If I know one thing for sure, we don't live in the perfect timeline. Our market-driven system has glaring flaws, but at the same time, it's increasingly difficult to identify what's a promising project for productive change and what's just the system repackaging itself in a new disguise. So maybe on a meta level, The Batman is the perfect story for this moment, not because it offers answers, but because it captures the confusion of trying to navigate a world where everything, even the language of change, feels like part of the machine. Hey y'all, thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out Mubi.com/JaredBauer for a whole month of great cinema for free. Also, be sure to subscribe because the next video is on Whiplash. Hope you guys are having a great spring. Take it easy. Peace.